What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
But it is the awareness itself that will drive the change. And one of the ways it will drive the change is through global governance and global agreements.
Now, much has been said by the Secretary of State and others about a new world order, about a defining moment in history. I have no doubt about the potential of this moment to be defining in terms of history, but that definition can be negative as well as positive.
Few phrases stemming from the world of conspiracy theories are as infamous as jet fuel can't melt steel beams, Epstein didn't kill himself, and the New World Order. While every so often the truther community creates phrases that manage to gather enough traction to permeate the shroud of resistance that the mainstream public is so carefully cocooned in, the New World Order actually can't be attributed to us. It was them that created it. And when I say them, I mean the most powerful people in the world. Those whose decisions cause immediate changes that end up reverberating across nations all over the globe. According to Wikipedia, the New World Order is a conspiracy theory which hypothesizes a secretly emerging totalitarian world government. The common theme is that a secretive power elite with a globalist agenda is conspiring to eventually rule the world through an authoritarian world government, which will replace sovereign nation-states. Many influential historical and contemporary figures have therefore been alleged to be part of this cabal. But what does the New World Order mean exactly? It clearly appears that people like George H.W. Bush, John Kerry, and the others promoting the idea are referring to a future that is global in nature, one with far less focus on individual states and nationalistic tendencies, and instead focusing more on global governance to tackle issues that affect all countries, such as climate change. Many influential historical and contemporary figures have therefore been alleged to be a part of this cabal that operates apparently through many front organizations to orchestrate significant political and financial events, ranging from causing systemic crises to pushing through controversial policies, both at the national and international levels. All of these being steps in an ongoing plot to achieve world domination. Admittedly, this sounds entirely outlandish. However, the fact remains that the world leaders we've been taught to trust are the ones who have been using the term as far back as after World War I, maybe even before. At what point did the vision they promoted somehow turn into a conspiracy theory? What aspects of the mainstream definition are true and which ones are false? I personally never used to believe in such a thing, regardless of which world leader was saying it. In my eyes, the world is simply too large and too complex to effectively rule over in the ways they are accused of doing. This is a criticism I still hear echoed to this day by those resistant to the idea. And it's because this sentiment has managed to persist into the present that I hope the series is able to make the prospect seem a lot more realistic. After all, who can blame the critics for thinking such a vast topic with unfathomable implications is unrealistic? Can you really blame them for doubting that a criminal syndicate pursuing world domination would ever straight up admit to it out in the open, in front of those they wish to dominate? It would help if, upon becoming curious about the subject and starting to research it, people aren't confronted with this as the very first thing they see on the subject. Okay, before we begin, let's summarize what it is we have here. We have the most powerful world leaders dating back to after World War I using the same phrase, the New World Order, in the same context, referring to the creation of a more globalized world focused on global governance and less on individual sovereign states. On the other hand, we have people like Alex Jones and others claiming that the New World Order are devil-worshipping pedophiles who, by using mind control and propaganda, convince the populace to become an unthinking herd animal akin to cattle, happily marching themselves into a totalitarian world control system, which is integrated heavily with technology and includes everyone being microchipped and tracked, thus accepting the mark of the beast as prophesied in the Bible. That sounds like a lot to unpack, but it isn't really. All it takes is a small group of people at the higher echelons of major institutions to enact change, the top 1%. Unfortunately, I think critics that are resistant to these ideas are misinterpreting our theories.
So why, after all these years, do all these conspiracy theories persist?
Conspiracy theories are ultimately about power. There's never a conspiracy theory about, the homeless guy with no arms and no legs conspiring against us.
So how does a conspiracy theory start?
A lot of times what happens is people will just come up with some of these ideas on their own.
The simple fact is, it doesn't require entire institutions and organizations to be corrupted or compromised in order to achieve this plan.
If the Paris Peace Conference marked a new beginning, the League of Nations was to provide the framework for the new world order. For the first time in history, the nations of the world would unite in a world organization.
The League of Nations was founded on January 10, 1920 at the Paris Peace Conference after the utter and unprecedented destruction of World War I. It was the first worldwide intergovernmental organization, and its primary mission was to maintain world peace and avoid any future world wars. The primary architect of this group was President Woodrow Wilson, who would end up winning a Nobel Peace Prize for his role in the creation of this group. The League represented a massive and fundamental shift from the world order of the preceding 100 years, when it came to the diplomatic philosophy that fueled it. As opposed to having its own armed forces, it depended almost entirely on the First World War allies to enforce its resolutions and keep to its economic sanctions, even providing armies when needed. Even though Woodrow Wilson was credited with being the driving force in the creation of this group, its very existence seemed to contradict his perceptions on how the world really worked only a few years earlier in 1913 when he wrote his book, The New Freedom. In it, there is one curious segment. Quote, "Since I entered politics, I have chiefly had many men's views confided to me privately. Some of the biggest men in the United States, in the field of commerce and manufacture, are afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it." Who is it exactly that Wilson is referring to here? While it might be easy to write off such a statement as possibly referring to something far less nefarious than an organized group of people wishing to dominate the world, as we move forward, you're going to see references to this elusive and powerful group by multiple world leaders, therefore eliminating the possibility of us taking remarks like that out of context. It does appear that something is being referred to by each of the individuals. In 1946, the League disbanded, ultimately failing its primary objective to maintain world peace and prevent any other future world wars. Although the League of Nations had failed, there is one group that would be created and become far more successful, even persisting to this day.
For 100 years, the Council on Foreign Relations has been helping America play a vital part on the world stage. The Council has served as an invaluable resource for its members, policymakers, and the public by publishing bold new ideas, providing research and a forum for debate, and proposing policies. CFR has helped navigate the challenges of a changing world ever since it was born out of the ashes of a global conflict.
The Council on Foreign Relations began as a working fellowship of 150 scholars in 1917 called the Inquiry, a group tasked with briefing President Woodrow Wilson about the different options for the post-war world. The academic band of this group, which included Edward Mendelhaus and Walter Lippmann, were essential in assisting Wilson in preparing materials for the peace negotiations that would follow World War I, and their reports would end up forming the basis of what would eventually become the 14 Points. Resulting from the discussions held at the Peace Conference, a small group of American and British diplomats and scholars met on May 30th, 1919 at the Hotel Majestic in Paris. There, they decided to create an Anglo-American organization called the Institute of International Affairs. However, they ended up founding separate institutions instead, and the British went on their own path to create the Royal Institute of International Affairs, also called the Chatham House in London. The Council on Foreign Relations name itself stems from secrecy. The title was actually the name used by the scholars who had difficulty enacting their plans, turning their focus instead to holding discrete meetings, which started in 1918 in New York City. under the name Council on Foreign Relations, despite that not being the official title. Presently, the group's membership features a shocking amount of extremely powerful and wealthy individuals. It has 5,103 members and has included over a dozen secretaries of state. It also includes bankers, professors, CIA directors, senior politicians, as well as senior media figures. The group also runs the David Rockefeller Studies Program, which is a program aimed to influence foreign policy by making recommendations to the presidential administration, testifying before Congress, interacting with the media, and publishing works on foreign policy issues. Now, you may recall that the Rockefeller family has a similar tendency to create extremely powerful and far-reaching groups, being as it was John D. Rockefeller that created Standard Oil in the 1880s, which was eventually declared a monopoly and was ordered to be broken up into 34 different companies. As you can see, these people have a tendency to try and centralize power. Their influence on the United States government should not be understated either, for their lobbying and massive donations to politicians have swayed the direction of politics for many years. In July 1973, a new power group was created by David Rockefeller called the Trilateral Commission. It is a non-governmental, non-partisan discussion group aimed at fostering closer relationships between our allies overseas. It was created during an era of considerable discord among our allies in Western Europe, Japan, and Canada. The group was organized by Zbigniew Brzezinski, who previously was a Rockefeller advisor specializing in international affairs. The group has not escaped criticism. Noam Chomsky has accused the group of being undemocratic, citing its publication, The Crisis of Democracy, which describes the strong interest in politics during the 1970s as a, quote, excess of democracy. He states that the modern democratic system isn't really a democracy at all, but rather controlled by elites of the highest class of society. Chomsky has been noted as saying, quote, that's where Jimmy Carter's whole government came from. The Trilateral Commission was concerned with trying to induce what they called more moderation in democracy, turn people back to passivity and obedience so they don't put so many constraints on state power and so on. They were concerned about the institutions responsible for the indoctrination of the young, meaning schools, universities, church, and so on. The young are not being sufficiently indoctrinated. They're too free to pursue their own initiatives and concerns. These are very alarming beliefs. And Chomsky isn't the only critic. Others have openly accused the Commission of promoting a global consensus among the international ruling classes in order to manage international affairs in the interest of the financial and industrial elites under the trilateral umbrella. In other words, they seek to make legislation and changes that benefits them and others like them. Barry Goldwater, former Republican senator, suggested in his 1980 book, With No Apologies, that the Trilateral Commission was, quote, a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power, political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical, in the creation of a worldwide economic power superior to the political governments of the nation-states involved. Those outside of the world of conspiracy theories most likely are not familiar with the groups like the Council on Foreign Relations or the Trilateral Commission, and how they play a major role in radically changing the landscape of international society. There are two power groups currently existing in the world that would more than likely be recognized by the mainstream public. One of those power groups is called the Bilderberg Group.
Forget the G7. If there's one party leaders want to be invited to, it's Bilderberg. That's where world leaders from politics to industry discuss. Well, we have no clue what they discuss because Bilderberg is an invite-only, ultra-secret conference where the press is not allowed, no minutes are released, and security is super tight. But to whet conspiracy theorists' appetite, they are kind enough to release the guest list. So this year, the hills near the Austrian city of Telfs will be alive with the sound of Google chairman Eric Schmidt chatting with the UK Chancellor George Osborne. CEOs and execs from the world's biggest companies, including airlines and banks, will also be there, from HSBC to JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank. Jens Stoltenberg, the head of NATO, might be interested in catching up with prime ministers from around the world, while David Petraeus, the four-star general and former director of the CIA, might want a private chat with John Sawyers, the former head of MI6. Just like every year, expect to see images of protesters. Over the decades, the group has been accused of triggering the Serbian war and trying to impose a new world order.
The Bilderberg Group is an annual conference, and it was established in 1954 in order to cultivate dialogue between Europe and North America. Originally, this group's primary objective was to prevent another world war, which should sound familiar to you, as this was exactly what was attempted with the League of Nations many years before that. Presently, though, the group's agenda is now defined as, quote, bolstering consensus around free market Western capitalism and its interests around the globe. Like the other power groups, those in attendance at these meetings are the most powerful in the world. Participants include political leaders, experts from industry, finance, academia, and the media, and each meeting typically includes around 120 to 150 people. Interestingly, those in attendance are encouraged to use the information they gain at these meetings, so long as they don't name the person whom shared the information. They say the reason for that is in order to encourage candid debate while maintaining privacy, but all it has really managed to do is fuel conspiracy theories about the group for many years. It isn't unreasonable to wonder why one would want to keep the originators of great ideas a secret, especially if those great ideas end up being implemented and affect the wider public, such as you and myself.
When you think of secret societies, you think of groups of rich old men, like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, sitting around a ridiculously long table, all trying to top each other with their best diabolical laugh. It makes for a fun cartoon, but in reality, such societies and secretive meetings do exist, and one is going on right now behind closed doors in England, the Bilderberg Group.
Nowadays, it is the United Nations that is recognized as being the premier intergovernmental organization that aims to maintain international peace and security via international cooperation and developing friendly relations among nations in order to harmonize the actions of other nations. The United Nations was established after World War II and succeeds the ineffective League of Nations we discussed earlier. The UN has 6 principal organs, which are the General Assembly, the Security Council, the Economic and Social Council, the Trusteeship Council, the International Court of Justice, and the UN Secretariat. UN also includes a multitude of specialized agencies such as the World Bank Group, the World Health Organization, which is particularly relevant at this point in time, the World Food Program, UNESCO, and UNICEF. Here in 2021, however, the world is only just now beginning to reopen in the aftermath of the pandemic that shook the world in 2019. COVID-19 has provided these intergovernmental organizations a perfect opportunity to fast-track their vision of the future. There is no better example of this than the World Economic Forum and their Great Reset agenda. Leaders across the world have stated their support for this vision, and similar to the New World Order, it seeks to upend the way of life that has been lived up until this point. According to the World Economic Forum's website, they explain how COVID-19 has provided an opportunity for this societal overhaul to occur. Quote, "As we enter a unique window of opportunity to shape the recovery, this initiative will offer insights to help inform all those determining the future state of global relations, the direction of national economies, the priorities of societies, the nature of business models, and the management of global commons. Drawing from the vision and vast expertise of the leaders engaged across the forum's communities, the Great Reset Initiative has a set of dimensions to build a new social contract that honors the dignity of every human being. Just like the stated objective of the New World Order, it seems as if the Great Reset is, once again, trying to change the world as we know it, this time using a global tragedy in order to do so."
The current global crisis has disrupted every aspect of our lives, but it has also presented us with an extraordinary opportunity, a chance to reset and accelerate efforts to improve the state of our world.
We need nothing short of a paradigm shift, one that inspires action at revolutionary levels and pace. We simply cannot waste any more time. The only limit is our willingness to act. The time to act is now.
As I mentioned earlier, critics of conspiracy theories like the New World Order tend to believe that the world is too complex to adequately control from the shadows. They believe it would require too many people to keep too many secrets, ultimately resulting in the world discovering their dastardly plans and stopping them before it could happen. However, now that we have a foundational understanding of the intergovernmental power groups and how they not only transcend the normal power structure of government, but do so in secrecy, like the Bilderberg meetings, it should be clear that such things are possible. While many may argue that the publicly stated objectives of these organizations are noble, we have to keep in mind that some of their meetings remain a secret for a reason. We also have to admit that, should some of these members of these exclusive groups feel so inclined, they could produce legislation that changes our world for the worse. We have allowed these groups to form and consolidate power based on blind trust alone, assuming these groups have the average person's best interest at heart.
I'm here with Bill Gates at Davos at an event to unveil a new initiative that you're excited about that's dealing with vaccines.
Well, we always have to worry that a new epidemic's going to come along. A flu epidemic that could go global.
But what if some of these members are corrupted in their own way? How does our perception of these groups and the world around us change if members of this group do not have our best interests in mind? What type of changes to our world would be made if straight-up criminals were operating within these groups? While I wish I lived in a world where criminals did not operate among the highest echelons of society, particularly within the United Nations, Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission, that is, unfortunately for us, not the case.
I invite my dear friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, to tell us how we can own the oceans.
First of all, Your Excellencies, Presidents, Lords, ladies and gentlemen, I just would like to thank you so much, and it's such an honor to be here.
If someone like Ghislaine Maxwell, a child sex trafficker and former partner of Jeffrey Epstein, is somehow able to speak in front of the United Nations to promote her ocean conservation project, who else might be lurking within these groups, and what level of influence do they have over them? While it's important to clarify that Maxwell was merely speaking in front of the United Nations as a guest rather than having any true influence over the organization, this does not change the fact that they still insisted on inviting her, despite her known relationship with Epstein, whom by that time was already known as a pedophile stemming from his 2007 arrest. Maxwell may not have had any true influence over the UN in the conventional sense, but following Epstein's arrest in 2019, many media outlets were breaking stories that indicated that the group had more of an unconventional influence over world leaders.
In this country, one of Jeffrey Epstein's accusers is providing chilling new insight into his alleged sex trafficking operation. Maria Farmer says Epstein sexually assaulted her more than 20 years ago. In her first TV interview, Farmer alleged that Epstein had extensive surveillance inside his home, including tiny pinhole cameras.
He showed me where the men monitoring everything were. The media room is what he called it. Yeah. And so there was a door that looked like an invisible door with all this limestone and everything. And I looked on the cameras and I saw toilet, bed, toilet, bed. I'm like, I am never going to use the restroom here, and I'm never going to sleep here. You know, I mean, it was very obvious that they were like monitoring private moments.
When we talk about the New World Order, it may not always be the case that world leaders and other power figures whom promote it are ideologically aligned with its vision. There's a good chance that many of them are. However, there's an equally good chance that many of them could have been blackmailed, forced into doing the bidding of rogue operations like Epstein and Maxwell's in order to achieve certain objectives. From my research into the subject, it appears most likely that there are two separate elements at play here at the very least. Those that genuinely believe in the century-old vision of the New World Order, now rebranded to be called the Great Reset, and those who are coerced into assisting them through more secretive means like bribery and blackmail. As an optimist, I like to believe that Maxwell speaking at the United Nations was an anomaly, an oversight on their part, perhaps because they were unaware with her and Epstein's operations. However, a closer look at the membership of both the Trilateral Commission and the Council on Foreign Relations casts doubt on that notion.
Now to sentencing day for Claire Bromford, the Seagram liquor heiress who prosecutors say spent tens of millions funding the group Nexium, whose founder was convicted of sex trafficking and child exploitation.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order.
Oh. Thank you very much, Richard, and I am delighted to be here in these new headquarters. It's
good to have an outpost of the council right here down the street from the State Department. We get a lot of advice from the council, so this will mean I won't have this far to go to be told what we should be doing and how we should think about the future.
Billionaire businessman Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in New York Saturday on federal charges related to sex trafficking.
As we now know, these intergovernmental organizations transcend the power structure of conventional government and are now the true power influence on world governments. Many members of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberg Group, and the United Nations have called for a new world order, and they have the means to bring it to fruition. If these are the types of people these groups employ, how are people like you and I to trust their judgment when it comes to the creation of a new social order? Is a future constructed by that of war criminals and sex traffickers really the type of future we wish to raise our children in? This series will take an in-depth look at what exactly the New World Order is, how they are rolling it out, and who exactly is involved. This is The Reset.